Airtable and WPF, we will see how we can connect Revit with Airtable effectively. Airtable is a great free-to-use database. For the most part, I will be using pyRevit in the extension called pyRevit Tutor. To enable that extension, you will need to go into your pyRevit extensions, make sure pyRevit Tutor is enabled, and after you do that, before you see it on your screen inside of your Revit, you will have to reload. Then the second thing that we need to get rolling really is to open inside of Visual Studio. And let me do that for your convenience, just because I already have it on my screen. So I'm going to close that folder, go and do an open folder. And here I want to browse to app data enclosed by the percentage sign. And this is the shortcut to update the roaming folder, which contains, in my case, and most probably in yours, pyRevit master. If it's not there, you will need to figure it out. It's somewhere around, but this is the main folder, the root folder that we'll be using. So open this one out. Now, the other thing which I've done, and let's do it together again, is to create a new folder inside of the pyRevit Tutor, inside of pyRevit Tutor tab. Here is the place where we want to create a new folder. Let's call it Airtable .push button. And again, make sure this is inside of the sessions panel. And open the bundle YAML file that you see in this folder and add Airtable, which will now allow the extensions thingy to recognize your plugin, basically your script. Inside of this Airtable push button folder, you want to have at least those two files to make everything work. The first one is script.py, which will contain our script. And then I would just borrow any of the icons, so an icon.png. Now, if I reload this inside of pyRevit here. All right, so that's done. And here we go. We have the Airtable push button. It doesn't do anything at the moment. Just to test it out, let's inside of script.py do a print of hello world and save that out. Control save, and then if we start Airtable, we will see hello world. So perfect, that's working. Now we were basically creating two separate layers of this app. We'll have your typical front-end UI layer and your backend, which will be the web request, which connects to Airtable. So we'll start with the UI layer first. And okay, it's going to be WPF, as we said, import COR add reference to system inside of this quotation mark system Windows forms, and also I'll just copy paste it. We also want a reference to IronPython. .wpf. So from pyRevit import script, and as I said, this script get bundle file method, which we will pass our file reference, and this will effectively be our XAML file. So let's go ahead and create this XAML file here. New file is going to be called ui.xaml. Okay, script file. So which is, first we need to import the WPF PF, thank you, and then from system import Windows. Right, so finally we will create our class my window, which will take Windows window as a parameter, and we will create its constructor, which is def double underscore init double underscore self. So finally we will call our WPF load component self, and here we will pass this XAML file reference that we created earlier. My window dot show, is it show dialog? And let me give that a go. Now UI is empty at the moment. Let's first create something in here. We're not going to be scripting all the XAML code inside of Visual Studio Code, because you wouldn't be able to see, you wouldn't be able to visualize what your window looks like. But thankfully Visual Studio is another IDE which is very good for these purposes. Start Visual Studio, whichever version you have on your machine. I'm using 2019, and I will be creating a new project in here. Let's look for WPF to narrow down our options, and we would like to use WPF core. I will call mine dummy WPF, and when you start this project, it already comes with a window, a main window defined for you, which we will be using as a boilerplate code to start off our window with. All right. So like I said, this is the boilerplate code in here, and this is what the window looks like. Let me maximize my solution. Right, so I want to work with our own file that we created. So going back to Visual Studio Code, let me right click Review in File Explorer, and I will copy the link to this file, and going back to Visual Studio now, I will add an existing item, and let me show all the possible file extensions, the UI XAML. But before you add it, just add it as a link. So this file is empty at the moment, doesn't have anything. What we can do very easily is to simply copy all of that from the existing main window and paste it in here. This should then create virtually the same thing. We don't need a couple of things in here, namely we don't need this X class or the name of it. We do need the second and the third line, and nothing else really. So we can keep title, height and width, but we can delete everything until the second line now. So if we save that out, it's not gonna change anything. So if we go back to the script py and let's try to execute it, we will see that something is not going to go right, and that would be because, so that was only one argument. The error here really is that my window should be called with the brackets, and other than that it should be fine. If we execute this window now, it's going to show up empty as it is, and it's very easy for us to test it out further by just creating a little label in here to call label content. We'll call it, yeah, hello world from WPF. Let's close this one out, and if we start it out, will see hello from WPF. Perfect. So our rig is working correctly. Crit is a container. WPF has a few container objects. I only want a stack panel, which stack panel basically, so let me change it back to grid to demonstrate. If I copy paste this element a couple of times and they overlay on top of each other, they have no concept of, I haven't given them a way to organize themselves spatially. If I change this to stack panel, they will now follow, they will stack horizontally. You can change the orientation of the elements by calling the orientation property of the stack panel, and you can change that to horizontal if you want, but I'm fine with having them vertically. And yeah, that's another container. Okay, so here's how I think about it. Label, you normally place before a piece of content that does something else, like a button or a text box or something else. Text block is a dedicated piece of text which is slightly longer in nature. And finally, you have the text box, which is an interactive element. So, and label has the content property, whereas in text block and text box, it's the text property which handles the text. And you will see that the text box has something different inside of it. If I start this one out, text box allow me to type in user input, which is great, and that's a functionality we will actually be using today. Now, with that in mind, this is usually what an element, any sort of element, the window itself, the stack panel, label, it starts and ends with a tag. That's called a tag. It's the opening tag and the closing tag of the element. If you want, you can use the property in for the text of the text block and script further and type in more content if you want. But what happens if you want to go for a new line? Then this simply is an index that adds spacing to your text. And what actually you can do is, I will cut this one out, remove the text element, the text property, and I will enclose my text inside of those two tags. So between the opening and the closing tag, you can place the content, whatever that content is, of the element. It will work the same, I think, if we do it with the label. So we can copy paste that in here, removing the content, and we don't need to, yeah, so that's identical. If, however, you've already used the content and there is nothing for you to enclose between the opening and the closing, there is a shorthand version of creating an element, which is to close off your element by placing the backslash just before the end of the opening tag. Whoa, that's a mouthful of things we just said there. Going back to our WPF. So let me just copy paste whatever I've done before. It says something like create a family or feature request, fill in details around the nature of the request, type of family, feature, or something else. And that's great. That first element is called create request, and it's slightly bigger, and there is no text block in here, right? Okay, so first of all, we can see that everything on our form inside of XD is slightly set inward, which makes it more elegant, and it's the normal thing to do. Normally you would do in any UI tool, you'll be using the margin for that. Margin is just that, it creates a margin around your elements and it effectively pushes everything in. every element can have a margin, and if I add margin to my label, I can push the text block which is below it by certain amount. So if I type in here 30, there I will be successful in pushing the text block indeed, but as another consequence, I will actually be pushing my element around from the borders of the stack panel. So in order to prevent that, I can only push myself or push the element below. And margin has three different types of top, bottom, left and how does it go? Left and right, top and bottom. So this will say my left and right is a 0 and my top and bottom is 30. Or you can spell it out effectively starting from left, which is I want left to be 0, top to be 0, right to be 0, and bottom to be 30. So here we go. These are the three types of margin that you can use. The other thing here is to create a request label that is slightly bigger. So I can say something like font size equals 20 and see if that's more or less would do it. One thing that I should have done is change the width and the height to what I've done before. So 450 and 550 works fine here. So I'm gonna follow that out as well. Another is so you can, maybe you saw there for a second, you can decide what font family you'll be using, but instead of doing it per element, you can specify one for your whole form. So font family here, let's for example use Roboto. You wouldn't get a prompt, so you pretty much need to know exactly what font you're going for, and obviously that font needs to be installed on your machine. But yeah, this is how you can change the font for the whole UI. I'll change mine to Roboto. And there's something that I don't enjoy here, which is create starts as a label. There is a little bit of padding there, and maybe that's a good way for me to explain what padding is. Padding is the kind of like the counterpart of margin, whereas margin comes around you as an element. Padding dictates the spacing inside of that element. So if you imagine that the label contains a piece of text, you will be able to move the text relative to the boundary of the label through the use of the padding. So we can, in this case, let me show what's going to happen if I do padding of 5. Okay, but if I do a padding of -5, that would allow me to glue the elements to the border. Another thing is that here we have plenty of text, but it sort of it's getting lost at the moment, and that's because the text block needs to get it's called text wrapping, and currently it's not wrapping, it just fits whatever it can inside of its boundaries. But if you do text wrap with overflow, it will allow it to create a multi-line text, which is what we want in here. Finally, I would actually want to push my text a little bit further below to give it a little bit of breathing room. Let's do a margin of left and right we don't need, and we need, let's say, a 5 top and bottom, which should do. Yeah, so that looks pretty good already. I can keep going below. Before I get to the next piece of text, let me add a line. Adding a line, it's called Separator. And if I create one separator, I will see that this separator now spans within the margin that I've given in the stack panel, which, similar to what we did here with the padding, we can do with the negative margin. So we know that we want the separator to go back to the full margin, the full boundary of the window effectively. So we need to give it a -30 in the left and right location. And actually, while we're at it, we might as well give it a positive margin to give a little bit of spacing. So with that done, we can paste that same piece of text block and copy paste from my predefined user here. And because we've done it previously, now this text wraps around nicely and it's just what I need. Not wasting any time, we can create another separator in here. It's perfect the way it calls. Another label. Sounds like this is a good place for us to use another label, which explains what the element after it will do. So let me copy paste a label which will say urgency. The font size is way too big this time around though. So let me just remove that. And the label will be followed by a drop-down. Drop-down in the world of WPF is something that is called combo box. And a combo box contains, just to give it a try what it will look like, but it normally contains a number of elements that you will be able to choose from. It's a list of items and it's enclosed inside of something called item source. And we'll be setting it out from our script py when the time comes. But just to see what it would look like, let's place a little text. Gonna say normal 3 to 5 days. Nothing is gonna show, and that's because we need to make sure this is editable equals true, meaning that we should be able to change whatever is inside of this combo box. Let me give it a little bit of margin as well. From top, what does it need? Maybe a 10, 0 for left and right, and a 10. Also, I would like to break it visually, so I will specify that the font weight dictates if you have like a bold or a thin or a normal, medium. So I'll use a light version just to break it visually and say, okay, this is a different type of element. Also, I would like to style it a tiny bit. Now, a word about styling. As you can see in XD here, I've done rounded corners and just a softer look. And this is a very rush thing, by the way. But to get to even this rush result in WPF, that's a lot of work for me, at least. Styling is just another separate world that you need to spend a lot of time with, sadly, but that's how it goes. So now let's say minimum height will be 25 is okay, 25 is maybe there about. Let's say this is a 30 height component, and now I would like to be able to push whatever is inside of that component a little bit inward. And for that, let's use the padding of the element once again and give it a 5, maybe 10. Yeah, 10 looks pretty good. 10 looks pretty nice to me. So let's copy paste that out. Actually, just let's do the label first and follow it this time around with a text box. As we mentioned previously, text box is the interactive element which will let the user provide some sort of input. And in this case, it's going to be the description of the ticket that they're opening. Again, for testing purposes, let's first copy paste whatever it's written in here. You can type anything you want, really. Similar issue that we had from before. If you remember, that's the text wrapping, so we can set that to wrap with overflow once again. And I would also want to make this light type of font to give it that same. Basically, I'm saying anything that's enclosed, I'm going to make it light, so it's kind of visually different. And again, a padding, sounds like a good idea here, not to get everything stacked so neatly. However, the padding needs to be positive so that it pushes things inside, and maybe in this case it needs to be slightly bigger, maybe not 15 but a 10. Okay, that looks nice. We could use a bit of spacing between those two elements. So that's the label, margin, give it a margin up, left, right. Actually here we would like top 20, right 0, bottom 10 maybe. Yeah, that looks better. And consistent, which is important. Urgency shouldn't be urgency. Urgency should be this text, which is please describe your issue in more detail below. And this text box currently will only span as much as it's needed based on this sample that I've provided it with. But again, I can use the same minimum height parameter to allow me to specify at the very least, give me a 250. That's, I guess, too much. 150. Yeah, even that's too much. Maybe 100, 120 minimal height. Perfect. So that kind of looks nice to me. Finally, a button, which should be very, very simple. One button, please. Coming straight up. Submit. Fine. Now this button in my case spans the whole length. We would like to give it a width of 115, sounds alright. Height 30, too thick 25, maybe something like that is nice. And because it's now the component right here is aligned inside of the center of the form, I would like to give it an alignment. And if I start typing align, horizontal, vertical, so horizontal alignment, I want it to be right, aligned to the right hand side, which is great. And is that it? I think that could be, no, I want to push it a little bit. Height, okay, that's fine. And I want to margin by 35, top. That's a bit too much. It's targeting, but also this is a prompt that I could sort something in here. I'm currently hard coding this value height, and if I start this from out of Revit, which is a good idea for us to do anyways, because there are a few things to check. Now this is started, I don't see my button. I also can drag this as much as I want, which probably is not ideal. I can drag it around as well. Nice thing that it, you know, is intelligent in its stretching behavior, which is great, but that's probably not what I want. I want to keep a consistent look that I can dictate beforehand. Also, when I start my window, it goes somewhere. It goes somewhere to the left here. And okay, I can change all that. It's also called main window. I can change all that. I can give it a different title. That's going to be Airtable. I can give it a, I can tell its size to content to be height. And this would mean that I no longer need the height. And it would always conform to the minimum height that it's needed for it to fit all the elements inside of this window. Very, very handy. And also I would like to say that resizing mode is no resize. So this is what we have, and forever and ever. Finally, I want this element to start at the center of the screen, which is start window startup location. And as you can see, I don't know all of these guys by heart. I don't know each command, but I'm starting to type in one of those key phrases, and Visual Studio is kind enough through its IntelliSense to let me type it out in full, which is very, very handy because I don't remember all of that. Okay, so you want this to be in the center of the screen. At least that's what I want. So now when I start the little form, that looks gorgeous, gorgeous, amazing. Obviously, this is just the looks. This is the platform into which we will want to build some form of intelligence. We would obviously want to, when hitting the submit button, something is going to trigger. When we type in here, we would like to be able to record this text somewhere. And when we go with the drop down, we would want to see some options. So all of that we will do in the what's called code behind. And code behind, we're just scratching the surface really of what code behind is. But if that was your UI here, the code behind is effectively the place where you're calling this XAML file from. You're calling the XAML file from here, you're creating the window from here, so that's your code behind. And WPF is so powerful, mainly because of the things you can do from code behind, which is dynamically associate pieces of your UI with part of your code. So when something changes in one, let's say the front end, it automatically propagates a change in the back end and vice versa. Again, just scratching the surface here really. Let's start simple and small by triggering something with this submit button. That's very easy actually. And it's as easy as creating, which way should we do? Creating a method, handle submit. Let's say, again, every time we have a method, sorry, it takes self as a single argument at the very least. And sometimes it takes more. In this particular instance, it does take 2 more arguments, which the first one is the sender object, and the second one is the arguments of the function, and they simply need to be there because this is the signature of the method that we will need. So here we will print hello world submit. Okay, and we back from the button in the XAML file, we can say click equals handle submit. So let's see if that worked. Hello world submit. So that's great. We were able to wire or associate the click event of this button with this method right here. It might be a good idea to document your script as you go. Okay, that's great. The next thing is to get somehow the context of this box, and that's the text box that the user will type their description inside of. And the way to do that is really to give it a name, to make it somehow special. And naming is start typing X, and then the name, that would be user input or user text box, and right back inside of our code behind. Instead of printing hello world, we can try to print the text of this element of this text box. So don't forget that it's self, it's our. So this is an element that belongs to this form, so self, and then user text box that will point to that correct element. And the property we're after is the text property of it, and we should be able to print that the user the user said, and then format and text. That's I think that's how you do text formatting here. So basically whatever this substitutes is substituted with the first parameter in the format. Okay, the user said, family request you're making will go to the gods of request, yeah, whatever. Okay, so perfect, that's fine, it works. Okay, so that worked. Let me explain text formatting just a tiny bit. It's very useful. In Python, in any language, you have some form of formatting your text, so it's not typed in all of it. Basically, you want at runtime to be able to pass in certain arguments and type their content as a string, and that's called text formatting. In Iron Python, it's done by following your string, in which case, in this case, this is the user, this user description, and then this is just a simple text for the time being. Once I put these curly brackets like so and say format, this string knows to take whatever is in the brackets that follow the first objects. So description, so again, this and or okay, more correctly is to do it like that, because you can then say you can string this together. You can say this is one description and this is another object which is color or something else, and if I say this is actually text equals this, just demonstrating what text formatting is. So we swapped the first one with description and the second one with color. I hope that makes sense. Great. So now we got the handle of the text box text element, which is perfect. That's what we needed. And finally, let's try to set the item source or the content of this dropdown somehow. It's going to be similar to the previous example, which will give it a name. And only don't name every single element, it's been said, but name only those which will be used in certain way, like which are special to you in some way. So this would be the urgency combo box. Here we'll say self is in the constructor, self urgency combo box items source. Be careful, it's items source. Come okay, so capital item, capital source equals, and this expects actually a list of items. So if I give it 3 strings inside of a list, so low, medium, large, for example, this should work, and this should actually set. Yeah, okay, I have a typo. Not surprised. I'm not surprised. Item source. Okay, normal 35. That's the text, the example that we saw before, but now you see that low, medium, large. These are the values that were given inside of our code behind. Yeah, and here we were successfully put that in a place that text is on a new line. So everything is working great. This is enough for us to go now to the backend and see how we can connect to Airtable. And after that, we will make those two work together.